we are engrossed in the material creation. You see? Because collective consciousness prevails. We need to go to retreats. We need to retreat. We need to create these containers where we can pierce that bubble and come out, even if temporarily. We need to create that puncture where time, space even altered slightly. For some more, for others less, but overall, if as a group we can have that, this is what I meant. Whatever level we reach leaves the mark in the memory of each and every one of you and in the collective memory. So we've agreed, right? We spoke about this. Let's say we have this first Tattva as Shiva, right? First Tattva. And then the whole cascading process of manifestation, right? Cascading process of manifestation that takes us all the way down to 36 Tattva, right? Prithvi. Which is earth, element and earth in the creational order. And then we spoke about Shiva as, and it depends how we want to graphically represent that. We either will put Shakti as the next Tattva down, or as has been suggested, as an overlapping Tattva. So that would be Shakti. Okay? So Shiva-Shakti, first two Tattvas. And then we have pure Tattvas or Shuddha Tattvas, right? Shuddha. Then we have Shuddha Ashuddha. Shuddha Ashuddha and Ashuddha, which in English means pure, pure impure, and impure. Okay? And at other times you may come across of this as para, para, apara. All this is in lieu of what Trika Shaivism operates with in terms of the vocabulary, right? In terms of that vocabulary of that sacred equilateral, right? With Shiva, Shakti, and Nara. Subject, means of knowledge, object, right? This is just to assist us here. That which means this would be para, apara. So the realms, these three major realms, absolute realm, psychic realm, and physical realm, realm of manifestation at the elementary level of creation. So, Shiva is Nara, subject, object. Shakti here, means of knowledge or the means of experience, right? So, means of knowledge. Means of knowledge. That's the aforementioned will, knowledge, action. That relationship, Ikcha Jnana Kriya. And the coveted mantra, Aham. Aham. That's the universal egoity, universal I amness. Shiva, Shakti, creation, manifestation. So it is clear that all this is an expression of unnameable. There's another term, Anuttara, beyond of the Buddhists, Anuttara. This is, let's say, that at which level no manifestation, nothing. In order for manifestation to take place, awareness needs to modify itself. And the modification here is that split into subject-object, which is carried by the power here of Shakti, which represents the means of knowledge. In other words, knowing how to do it. As simple as that. That's why it's called means of knowledge. So of course it has this dynamic and it has this dynamic, okay? The most interesting relationship here is of course between subject and object, because we know that Shiva conceals himself. I'm genderizing this simply because of the limitation of the language. Shiva conceals himself in manifestation. This is the beauty of the exposition of Kashmir Shaivism. So in other words, simply put, we live in the body of God as God who concealed himself from himself. So the reality, the manifested reality, it's the reality of God which conceals itself in creation, wraps itself in, filters itself. And this brings us, let's say that, because this Shuddha Tattvas, right? These are the Tattvas that we mentioned before, remember? The first unchangeable Tattvas, which are present everywhere at all times, but of course in a concealed state. Remember now? Right? Shiva-Shakti, Yajna Kriya. Or if we name it differently, Shiva-Shakti, right? Sadashiva Ishvara Shuddha Vidya. That's how we name them when we give it to more detailed overview at the Good Soundstuff retreat. Or in English language, awareness, bliss, will, knowledge, action. Awareness, bliss, awareness, bliss, will, knowledge, action. All this is encompassed in the pure Tattvas. And the movement here, graphically represented, obviously, as a descent. As a descent, obviously, it descends. You have to have a degree of abstract thinking so as not to take it literally. Because that descent, obviously, and this is where, you know, those of you who have read philosophy and kind of more open to abstract thinking, this will not pose any problem. That even that process itself here, exemplified by 5 Kanchukas, is what creates the possibility of space-time as a fabric. Remember? So each of the 5 pure Tattvas is being concealed by the 5 coverings, with the force represented by each of these Tattvas. See how beautifully symmetrical that is. So in other words, only that power can conceal that, what it represents. I will repeat, only that power can conceal itself, which it represents. This is true to the reality of life, through and through. This is the beauty of monism. This is also not just settling on let's say, more religious-driven understanding, where individual will does not exist. Only the divine will exist. But the question of who am I remains, and the position of myself as a being remains to be unanswered. So I would have to either settle on that, which is fine if there is this propensity to not question, not to discriminate, not to, well, simply not have any desire to know the state of affairs, because one can simply revel in the aspect here which one can emote. So therefore that devotional aspect, one gives oneself to God, full stop. Do whatever you want, that's it. That's an attitude. Can you do it? If you can do it, great. But very few people in between can do it. And the Kashmir Shaivism as a system prefers to leave no stone unturned when it comes to the making the non-dual philosophy into a true philosophy. In other words, it gives a full picture of how everything is related and correlated. And then, of course, one can choose what mode of conduct one prefers. So it is that, because these questions have been raised before, that Kashmir Shaivism is an incredibly intellectual system. And it is true, absolutely true. It has a wealth of knowledge with regard to all this. And then in the Good Sound Stuff, I have also said that we can also view this from the concentric perspective, if you remember, when we delivered the Spanda course. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? When we gave the concentric, the wheels of Shakti, from Vameshwari to Bukhari. So that's the same perspective, but seen isometrically in a different way. So this process of manifestation, obviously, let's say individual experience, that's the sphere of individual experience. It's the sphere of absolute experience. And that's the sphere of what makes absolute into the possibility of experiencing itself through a limited point of view. Likewise, that what makes individual point of view open to the absolute point of view. So this, in other words, everything is checked by the dynamic relationship between subject and object, where Shakti is in charge. The power of Shiva, the power of self-awareness, that reflective power. So in other words, let's say level of the Prithvi is that's where a most compact contracted state where I am experiencing myself. Ontologically, Shiva and Nara, Shiva, universal consciousness, individual consciousness is one the same. They're not two different consciousnesses. They're one and the same. But the only difference is that individual consciousness is, as it were, suffering a full gamut of the process of manifestation that Shiva imposed upon itself for or in order to have form. This is where you give access to beauty. Beauty, the meaning of Namarupa here. It's a sacrifice. We're giving another stab or another angle at the coveted leitmotif of entire Indian civilizational setup, exemplified in Yajna, concept of yajna, how much we've been speaking about yajna in the last 3 years, right? Bringing that attention back to, without sacrifice, there's no religion, as Mahatma Gandhi said. Without sacrifice, there's nothing. You want something, you sacrifice one element into another element. Both elements are sacrificed so that you can derive with a third element. Look around yourself. Everywhere you lay your eyes, that is. Lump of clay sacrificed to become a cup. Anything. Seed is sacrificed to become a sprout. Flower is sacrificed for it to conceive the fruit, and so on, unstoppable. Make it now like a day-to-day example. Parents sacrificing themselves to bring kids. And the whole thing continues. You sacrifice your time and leisure and this and that in order to know yourself. Ultimately, you want to know God? Sacrifice yourself. I don't care. You open your veins, you slash your veins, you chop your head, you do karakiri. Don't quote me on that. It's disclaimer. It's just the way we like to make this work more exciting. How you sacrifice yourself, as long as you do. You sacrifice yourself without losing hair on your head. But your sacrifice is authentic. Granted. Why? Because this and that are the same. This and that is. And that's all there is. Now, why, if I am aham and that I-amness here, not at an iota less than that, why is it then it's not enough just to know this? Just to know this. So this is a very practical bit here. In the process of manifestation, now we use this language consciously, in the process of descent of spirit into matter, if you will. Maybe it's an old-fashioned language, I don't know. But in the process of manifestation, from pure to pure, impure, and impure, as the absolute categories undergoing psychic categories, only to gain the form and shape and smell and physical appearance and what have you. This, in order for it to truly be that, needs to then have that traversed path. This is the internal knowledge of otherwise what opened and can be broadcasted on the street. Non-duality is a street broadcast. You are already that. I agree with you. You are already that. Where is your clothes and coat? Pack your bag, go home. You have a little headache, take a painkiller. You are already that. Shiva. What are you doing here? I can't even read what's written on your t-shirt. You're wasting your time, man. You are already that. You cannot be closer to that, no further away from that, not further apart from that, because that's how it is. Non-duality discourse. No refund, because there was Dattatreya made it, booking pages speak and span. We continue with the discourse, therefore, shall we? I forgot this. Tongue-in-cheek, it's called. Do you have tongue-in-cheek in any other parts of Europe? No? There's no tongue-in-cheek? Damn it. Put it into a glossary. Now, so I am already that. See? There's only that. Okay, let's go further. This is where we're entering the internal. This is where we're entering the worth their salts that bit, worth their salt. In the process of manifestation, we entered the realm of, literally in Sanskrit, it's called ashuddha, impure. Knowledge is purifying, but it has to be accompanied, of course, through the fullness of that process, which is reversing that. And that is the coveted meaning, the true meaning of the awakening of the life force. Because this is crown of the head and the base of the spine. That process of manifestation through the Tattvas is what you are as a walking universe. So this is the same realm, the pure categories, realm of psychic Tattvas, which holds together the heaven and earth, because this is where it is balanced, balancing act. And the realm which constantly pulls us down with all its force, all the time, with hunger of all sorts, with pangs of all sorts, with pangs, from pangs for this to pangs for that, because that's the realm of impure categories. And that order is only fully reversed when it is traverses in its propensity, reversing the descent. See? So, in other words, that in itself is why in the yogic terminology, tantric terminology, and Vedantic terminology is called process of purification. This is a true process of purification. And the process of purification can reach the degrees when that what is known, let's say, at the level of conceptual framework, at the level of mental modifications, is then known at the cellular level. In other words, enlightenment is a bodily affair. As some masters have alluded, even in the Western world, they went that far in their conclusions. It's a somatic affair. It's a full bodily affair. Because if the body lags behind, as it always does, then there is constant reminder required. When body caught up, you don't think about it anymore. You don't need to. Your cells vibrate in that. They simply know at the level where they don't need cortexes in the brain anymore. And everything functions as it is. And that's why it's called natural state. This is the Sahaj Samadhi. So, question would be asked then, would then that mean and presuppose, and just before we go there, so that's what Sri Aurobindo called, that's what he called for, and that's what he called in his work, divinization of matter. The term that comes with the teachings of Sri Aurobindo Ghosh. Divinization of matter. The divinization of matter is that process of reverse. And it can be seen from ontological and epistemological point of view, from the so-called subjective point of view of an individual as crown, right? As crown, right? As crown, like whatever, with all the 1,000-petaled, versus base, right? And it can be also applied to the entire societal setup. So in other words, collective consciousness also, this can be applied to collective consciousness and must be applied to collective consciousness. So if by large civilization, culturally shared consensus gravitates towards only this, right? And then everything in terms of the actual transformation of consciousness is only given to religious code of conduct, do's and don'ts, occasional, like, kind of putting cards on the table, emptying oneself in the boot, then that job kind of finished, then psychology came in, so psychologists, shrinks, replace the priest. It doesn't cut, folks. You know that it doesn't cut. It doesn't freaking cut the mustard, okay? That's what it's in English language. Translate, please. So then, of course, our overview, including then influence, is such that we are engrossed in the material creation. You see? Because collective consciousness prevails. We need to go to retreats. We need to retreat. We need to create these containers where we can pierce that bubble and come out, even if temporarily. We need to create that puncture where time, space even altered slightly. For some more, for others less, but overall, if as a group we can have that, this is what I meant. Whatever level we reach leaves the mark in the memory of each and every one of you and in the collective memory. So this is not empty slogans, that in gatherings like this, we uplift humanity by mere fact that we simply touch certain level in our own awareness. That's how it functions. This is the 100-monkey effect and what have you. Now, going back to where we have put a pause. So, supposedly, this is how it is. So, if I fully realized my Shivahood, essence as Shiva, am I then embedded with that same power with which Shiva is embedded in the process of manifestation, which allows the process of manifestation? This is very important, and this is required for us to look into this. According to Kashmir Shaivism, Shiva has this quality known as Svatantrya. It could be translated as absolute freedom. Svatantrya. And because of that absolute freedom, it has the power to filter its own powers. Do you see? Because of that Svatantrya, it can limit itself. So an embodied being like you and I, which is Shiva in disguise, can realize Shiva in its full measure, minus Shiva's Svatantrya. Reflect on your own why that is. So if you are in the body, means this dynamic is intact. You are unimpeded in your awareness. You are one with Shiva. But you cannot just, even if transgressing this whole process of manifestation, because you are in the body. You see? You, Shiva, now carrying the limitations that you impose on yourself. Because in this monistic system, there is no place left for you and I. None. There's no room to squeeze in my little self somewhere. Show me. Where can I put it? Subject, means of knowledge, object. Shiva-Shakti, Nara. Nara is Shiva in disguise. Okay? Or Nara is Shiva in potentiality, disguising himself. Whichever way you want to put it. That's what also called pure subjectivity. Pure subjectivity. So it's not subjectivity with regard to these malas, impurities, or thinking of oneself as so-and-so and minding one's own business or this and that. But pure subjectivity is the true meaning of I am, which is always prior to anything that then being identified with. So I amness, therefore, the pure subjectivity. It's the reality of the situation. It's what we experience at all times, irrespective of the state of affairs as it may be perceived at any given moment in time. But a moment that there is something that is then perceived on the account of being in the body, I am is eclipsed there and then. And pure subjectivity is eclipsed by ahamkara. We will leave the room now to discuss this in greater detail, because it's very important when we go to the role and place of individual will, intent, and also where is that pure subjectivity gains such tremendous gravity that it is then experienced with such great conviction as, or instead of purity of I am. Do you understand that? Do you understand that? How that actually happens? I'm saying that what's here the difference between pure subjectivity and how that subjectivity limits itself to a particular experience pertinent to each and every one of us. It's been alluded already earlier, in the earlier days of our immersion, that there are phases of how that aham undergoes a funneling, starting with the Kanchukas. In the Spanda course, we dealt with that. At the level of the will of Vameshwari, when we move to the level of Kekari, if you remember, that's when the first step towards subjectivity takes place, which lays the seed or acts as a blueprint of the fully blown sense of ahamkara, sense of individual self. We'll come back to that, as I said. So going back to that Shiva minus Svatantrya, going back to that, why an embodied being can experience all the glory of Shiva except for that power. I'm the director. I directed my own play and I decided I want to play one of the roles. I'm conducting the play, I'm directing the play, but I'm also playing one of the roles. Okay? So I have unlimited power as the director. It's my play. I'm not doing here Chekhov or Bertolt Brecht, Bertolt Brecht. I'm not doing here any classics. I'm not doing here any whatever. I don't have to pay homage. It's my own. Autobiography-based or what have you. Life-based. I'm conducting and directing it. I put my own 50 million in a project. I have some say. So it's not just producer comes and each time tells me what to do and what not to do. At least we have a shared say. Use this analogy. But I'm already acting in my own play. I can't do as I please in a role. Not impressive. Not, it doesn't impress you. Doesn't seem to, I don't feel the feedback. Don't feel the feedback. So you never made the play when you were in school, right? You never conducted the play. Let's fish for another example then. Let's look for another example. Okay, well, let's give that example. It's going to be a little bit more esoteric because I still like the one where I cannot forgo I cannot forgo the whole overarching, let's say, screenplay of all this in my own roles. I cannot just go and suddenly in the middle of acting, let's say, like this hero or villain or what have you, suddenly like in the middle of the play, on stage or in a movie, if it's an expensive equipment, lights, camera, action, we're filming here with these cameras, this camera, and I'm suddenly, what, so that I'm Shiva, okay? Fuck all of you. I'm like, this role doesn't mean anything. Jesus, I'm just invested so much of my funds, right? I'm like doing the best work of my life. And suddenly I'm blowing up the plot. Okay, forget about it. Next example. So I'm enchanted myself into this role, and in order to enchant myself to such degree that I forget my essence, I have to apply all the gamut of this, let's say, what goes into that self-enchantment. You see? I suddenly have a glimpse that I'm actually in a state of enchantment, and I know my essence. I know what it is. I'm giving the example of awakening, more of a classical example. But the power of enchantment is still intact. I cannot disenchant myself because I so skillfully enchanted myself. Because I'm in that body, even the fact that I'm in the body, all that is enchantment. See? So this is why in the monistic system, it's not a glitch. To me personally, it's a beautiful philosophical resolution of why, if Shiva and Nara, subject and object, are forever one, there is no such thing as subject without an object without a subject. This is why it is considered to be that Holy Trinity. If Nara is nothing other than Shiva in disguise, does that mean that Nara beyond any limitation? At the psychological level, no, it is not. But at the level of self-enchantment, it is subject to all the laws of nature I impose upon myself in order for this to be. Because to dismantle Kanchukas is to dismantle fabric of space-time. Then my body will disintegrate like in the Lucy film. Have you seen it? It doesn't matter. If you disintegrate it, the rest doesn't exist anyway. So that's what it is. And that's where it's squarely settled in the expositions of Kashmir Shaivite masters. And the goal of every Shaivite, as that philosophy for 1,000 of years at least and more, is to gain the Shivahood, so as to remove any reason for psychological distress. Whilst this will carry on operating, driven by its own powers, that are my own powers in disguise, because I understand this setup.
To what you just spoke, just the way I understood it was like, I can no longer limit myself because I already limited myself. So I can only become free or stay limited.
That's a very beautiful way of looking at it. I would say it's a very fresh take. Very beautiful. In other words, when we touch the bottom, there's only way up, right? So it's like this movement, then there's only that movement. That's beautiful.